Well, we've been in the book of Hebrews, and we've been looking particularly here about faith in chapter 11. The heroes of the faith. We're looking at those prior to the flood who had remarkable faith in the Lord. And last week we spent some time looking at Enoch's life and him being taken out of the world before the flood, and of course before him dying, taken alive into the Lord's presence. Only at 365 years old. How would you like to live to be that old? And he was a very young pup, only living a third of the time of his other ancestors around him. So he was raptured when he was very young. And the Lord took tremendous delight in Enoch. And so we're looking at each one of these individuals, Noah afterwards, and their walk of faith. Just a confident expectation, okay, in what God had promised. Trusting God fully with His promises. Letting those promises direct their response in their life, in everything that they were doing. Enoch and both Noah are said to have walked with God. They had an incredible intimacy with the Creator. And this morning, we're going to take a look at the life of Abraham, who is next here in chapter 11, beginning with verse 8. And we're going to see the exact same thing with Abraham. A man of tremendous trust in the Lord. And so let's go ahead and let's bring up on the screen, I think I already have it here, Hebrews chapter 11, beginning with verse 8. Houston, we have a problem. Not yet. Let's see if it'll go backwards. Nope. Well, you got her. Okay. Yep. I think it's working. Good. Thank you. Appreciate that. So what we read about Abraham, and we're keeping in mind that we're looking at faith, okay? We don't have a full definition of faith here in Hebrews 11. We just got, a common definition. It's a confidence expectation in what God has promised. It's assurance. It's a deep conviction. But what it will do is it will alter our actions in our lives. And this is exactly what we read here about Abraham, that it was by faith that Abraham, when he was called by God, he obeyed. By going out to a place which he was to receive for an inheritance, and he went out not knowing where he was going. And by faith he lived as an alien, as a stranger in the land of promise, as in a foreign land, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, fellow heirs of the same promise. For he was looking for the city which has foundations, whose architect and builder is God. We've got these couple verses here concerning Abraham's faith. And what we got here is he was called and he obeyed. And so what we see is we got to turn back to Genesis and come into chapter 12 in particular, and we're going to see his calling. But one thing that we don't see in the book of Genesis about Abraham is how he came to faith in Yahweh. We know his father, Terah, but we don't see a relationship with Yahweh from Terah. Most likely he had. But Abraham, we aren't told how, but once he gets a call from the Lord, He obeys immediately. And so this is what we read in Genesis chapter 2 of that account. Now the Lord said to Abraham, I want you to go forth from your country and from your relatives, your family, and from your father's house to the land which I will show you. And I'll make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and so you shall be a blessing. And I'll bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in you all the families of the earth will be blessed. So Abraham went forth as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. Now Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. First thing, you notice it's not Abraham. I might have said that a couple times, but it's Abram. His name is changed to Abraham because he'll become the father of a great nation, many descendants, even though he will only have one son, so to speak, Isaac, the promised one. And so all we read here is that the Lord spoke to Abram. And he says, go forth from your country and from your relatives. In other words, I want you to leave your family. And the promises are given there. Several of them. I'm going to make you a great nation. I will bless you spiritually. And your name will be great, your character. And so you shall be a tremendous blessing. The one who blesses you, I will bless. It's at the age of 75 that he hears the voice of the Lord in this situation. Does anybody recall where Abraham was living when God called him? How good's your memory on the Bible? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to pull up a map. And so what we have here, if I can get my pointer to work again, is some believe Abraham's called out of Ur the Chaldees. Actually, he's going to be called out of Haran up here. But Terah leaves Ur the Chaldees, and sometimes we put Ur way down here by the Persian Gulf. And this, of course, is the Arabian desert. Nothing's in this mess here except desert. And you go up along the Euphrates River and then come across and come into the land of Canaan. Now, what I'm going to show you is I don't believe Ur the Chaldees is down here. I don't believe that Abraham and his family, Terah, his father, were originally down here in lower Mesopotamia. I believe they were up here in another city called Ur. So what happened, there was an archaeologist in the 1920s that did excavating down here in southern Mesopotamia and found that this city was called Ur. And so and he claimed that this is where Abraham and the family was originally from. Prior to 1920, all scholars agreed that it was Ur was up here in southern modern-day Turkey. Just a little north of the city Haran that Abraham is going to actually leave and enter into the land of Canaan. And so when you start thinking about some things and you want to do some homework, there's lots of evidence to show that Ur was in southern Turkey, not southern Mesopotamia. And so here we got another map. A modern-day map that I showed you. Remember, you got the Euphrates River running up through here. Okay, that's the Tigris right here. It runs up through here. But here's Haran. Up here's Ur. Okay, Urfa or Ur. And Haran is only a little bit south of it. And so this is where Abraham was when the Lord called him, and he would head down here into the land of Canaan and come into the land of Israel. Down here's Jerusalem. Here's the Dead Sea. Okay, So you got the idea of where this is at. A lot of mileage. Don't know the exact mileage, but it's a good area. And so back in the day, you're just walking along, moving the whole family in the herds. Yes, Eric? It wouldn't be too far. Assyria, and the capital would be, I believe, right in this area here, okay? Not too far. Modern day Syria right here. This is the boundary of Turkey. So it's right in southern Turkey. Okay, so that's Syria. Down here you got Jordan, weird shaped. Saudi Arabia, Iraq, right there in that area. It's good to know your geography when you're reading the scriptures and knowing where things are at and what is transpiring. And so God calls them out of Ur the Chaldees, and I think that we're told Ur the Chaldees because actually at that time there were several cities of Ur. And so the specification is the Ur the Chaldees, which would also point to this Ur in southern Turkey. And the name of these other cities that are right around here are all descendants of Abraham. And that's the name of the cities right there. Where Abraham and Terah came from. So what we got here also is this chart that we looked at last week, and this is important to know also, to try to hide some of these things in your mind. You got again the years of creation right here. Adam at 0, and then Seth is born at 130. Okay, and here's the lifespan of those individuals. Adam lived 930. And this is also the years from creation when they die, 930, 1042, okay? The flood happens here at 1656. And this is all based upon the genealogies in the scriptures, and this is extremely accurate. But as we saw last week, and we were looking particularly at Enoch, keep in mind, Enoch is raptured out at 365 years old, but he was alive for many, many years with Adam. So Enoch had the opportunity to talk to Adam and Eve, and to glean from Adam and Eve what the garden was like, what the Creator was like that they saw face to face. Enoch was so enthralled and so in love with the Lord that the Lord ended up taking him home without ever experiencing death. But also the Lord led Enoch, if you recall, to name his son Methuselah. What does Methuselah mean? Now come on, this was only last week. You're as bad as me. I'm asking you because I forgot. No. Good. When he dies, judgment comes. That's what Methuselah means. And so Methuselah, as you see here on the chart, he dies the year of the flood. And so in his intimacy, Enoch knew that he was to name his son Methuselah, and he knew that in the year that his son Methuselah died, that's when the judgment would come, the great flood. Things were not in good shape right from the beginning, and Enoch was living in a terrible, terrible time, and so was Methuselah and Lamech. And so the flood comes with Noah. So it's only Noah and his family that escaped the great judgment, the flood. But look here in this text. Noah dies at 206, and keeping in mind we're gone from creation down, okay? So he dies 2006 years from creation. But look at Abraham. He's born at 2008. Only 2 years after the death of Noah, Abraham is born. But if you do your homework, you will see that Noah's son, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, that were on the ark, okay, he lives 600 years old. He goes to 2158 when he dies. Abraham dies at 2183. And guess what? For 150 years, Abraham Abraham had possibility of talking with Shem for 150 years. Do you see it? Can you imagine the information that was passed down? Because Shem at 1056 could have met Seth, Adam's son. And so the information isn't passed down through 100 different generations, so to speak. And all the information is just 1 or 2 generations. And so they get firsthand information. And so Abraham, this is going to play a huge part. Who in the world? Shem. And as you read the scriptures, you allow some of this to sink into your mind. Abraham is eventually going to come and he's going to fight against the kings there at the Dead Sea. And he's going to defeat them. And he's going to end up giving 1/10 of the spoils to a king in the city of Jerusalem. Do you remember what the king's name was in the city of Jerusalem? Melchizedek, which just means the king of Salem, the king of peace. And Abraham pays 1/10 of the spoils to this king. And beyond a shadow of a doubt, the lesser always gives to the greater. And so guess what the Jewish scholars say? Guess who Melchizedek is? Shem. And that's what the Jewish scholars say. And see, you can begin to put some pieces of the puzzle together. And so all this information is important. And God gives us the genealogies for various reasons. The Gospels clearly shared in the names of the individuals in the genealogy, the Hebrew names. And then also He gives us a timetable in which He is working. God is not working in tens of thousands of years. He's not working in millions of years. Okay, the baloney that we hear from those who hold to evolution, things taking millions of years, it's all hogwash. Not truth at all. God is only dealing with thousands of years. And currently, we are closing in on the last of the 6,000 years, and we are right at the beginning of the 7th millennium, the day of rest. And so, all that being said, let's go back to the text. So it was by faith that Abraham, when he was called, he obeyed by going out to a place which he was to receive for an inheritance. So it's this tremendous trust that when Abraham hears the call, it says he obeyed. This word obeyed is made up of 2 words in the Greek. It has, the first word is hupo, which means to be extremely attentive, and the other word is akuo in the Greek, which means to hear. So it's to listen attentively. So he was listening attentively for the Lord, and he was going out. And so this interesting how it's set up in the Greek, that as he was going out, he was listening attentively for God's voice. And he would have to stay close to the Lord because he had no idea where he was going. And you better listen carefully. When your wife is giving you the directions when you're driving, and when she says, turn here, turn quick, don't miss it. I've had to do so many U-turns because I wasn't listening attentively to her voice. So what we see is Abraham was listening carefully to the Lord. And so, of course, we need to trust the Lord at the same time, and we need to listen attentively for His voice also. Enoch, beyond a shadow of a doubt, Noah, beyond a shadow of a doubt, listened extremely carefully to the voice of the Lord. And remember, God has not changed. He still speaks, and we need to listen. What? Every day. This week I was scraping off an area for a deck, removing all the topsoil. Had called 811, had them come out and marked where the power lines were running underground and marked where the sewer lines were and everything. But I'm listening to the Lord, and I'm looking at where the markers are in this yard. And I'm going, I can't see this, Lord. I can't see through the ground. I can't see where the lines are running, the sewer lines. I can't see where the power lines are running. And where He's got these markers make absolutely no sense. And so I'm listening. And so as I begin taking the topsoil off and removing some areas almost a foot of dirt, lo and behold, as I get into this one section, I decided I'm just going to keep the blade up a little bit on the machine as I come through here and tear the topsoil off. I tore the topsoil off, and it wasn't my thinking, it was listening attentively, relying attentively on the Lord. And so as I removed that, lo and behold, what do? Scrape this machine right across the sewer line. 4 inches under the ground, which is supposed to be 4 feet under the ground. Oh, what? This is insanity. And I went, Lord, I cannot believe. I just cannot believe that I didn't break that sewer line with that machine scraping right on the sewer line. So, okay, Lord, you're going to have to really protect me on this, and you're going to have to give me wisdom and guidance. You ever run an auger on a machine to dig holes, and it's spinning around, and it just goes right down into the ground? And, I mean, I'm boring 18-inch holes, okay, with this machine. And as I'm relying on the Lord, and as I'm talking to Him, and I'm going down, I'm going, and He goes, no, don't go any further. I said, okay, Lord. And I pull the bit back up out of the ground, walk over to the hole, look in the hole, and I go, no way. There's another line right directly in the center of the hole. Nothing's marked there whatsoever, only a little bit under the ground. This happened 3 times. Where the gentleman stuck the flags and marked things, there was absolutely nothing. He just walked through the yard and just, I think I'll stick one here. Maybe I'll put one over here. Hadn't I been listening to the Lord, I would have destroyed 3 lines beyond a shadow of a doubt. Don't tell me that He doesn't speak today. He does it all the time in my life. It's intimacy, just like Abraham listening attentively to the Holy Spirit. The Lord has, listen, does Satan have any problem? I always say this. Does Satan have any problem whispering sinful stuff into your ears? Yeah, you can hear that well, yeah. No problem, right, Eric? The problem is hearing the voice of the Lord. The closer you walk with Him, the more you're going to hear Him. So Abraham listened attentively, longing to hear from the Lord. The question is, how much do you want to hear from Him? The key in hearing is the obedience. He obeyed. He obeyed immediately. God's not going to whisper to you if you don't obey Him. If you aren't seeking Him, He's a rewarder, as we saw last week, of those who seek Him. He will reward you if you seek Him. But you've got to seek Him, and then you've got to listen, and you've got to obey. It's all tied together. And He'll blow your socks off. You will experience Him, and that's the Greek word gnosko. It's not to know intellectually, and we translate it know, but it means to know experientially. These things were written that you may know experientially that you have eternal life. It's to experience the Lord. It's not an intellectual thing. It's an experiential thing. But it's only found through obedience. It's only found through trust, through faith, coming after the Lord. Now, what we also see in the text there in verse 8, there at the bottom of the screen, it says that he went out not knowing where he was going. So he left Haran and he's headed south. But he had no idea where he was going. God doesn't give you and me the details in our life, does He? You and I think our lives are going to turn out one way, or we're going to do this, or we're going to do that, and you're going to find out that it doesn't turn out that way, does it? Things didn't turn out the way I planned it. Yeah, remember that song? You got that right. God knows all the details. And so He's the one, He knew exactly where the sewer lines were and where the electrical lines were. And I am so grateful of my intimacy with Him. And so I wasn't repairing a bunch of lines because it would have turned into a nightmare. By faith, we need to do the exact same thing. By trust, we need to listen to God even though we don't know the outcome. Our lives are a walk of trust. We don't know the outcome. You had no idea what the outcome was going to be with you coming here this morning. You had no idea what you were going to hear, right? None. It was by faith that you came. Knowing from experience in the past that the truth is preached. That we look at the Word together. And that I'm long-winded. See, our faith is in this Creator and His attributes. Our trust is in His attributes. So He's a marvelous being of love. He's a marvelous being of mercy. But He's also a marvelous being of judgment and of reproof. And what we have recorded for us is how He's worked in people's lives and how He's worked in nations. And so our trust in Him should be extremely solid. You realize what we're talking about. These guys have no written record of God. Nothing's written down yet as far as the Bible is concerned. They've been listening to the stories, and they've been listening attentively. And they've come to understand what the Creator is like and how marvelous He is and how He's intimately involved in our lives. They had nothing they could turn to like you and I are looking at. So Abraham, not knowing the details, goes out. Now, that's going to come with your life and my life and your obedience to the Lord and what He tells you to do. You never know what the outcome is going to be, do you? So guess what? Yesterday they pull up in my driveway. I'm working in the garage. Fortunately, I'm there. And they get out all dressed up. And they got a pamphlet in their hand. And I said, "Okay, Lord, here we go. This is going to be interesting. How will this one end?" And so they started talking to me. I started asking all kinds of questions. I wanted to know what they believed. And finally got to the point where I said, "Well, so you tell me Jesus isn't God? He's an angel?" "That's right. Jehovah created Jesus. He's an angel. He was the first angel Jehovah created." "Really? Well, that's interesting. That's not what my Bible says." And so after a half an hour, we got to the point where the conversation, I didn't get heated, they got heated. I just stated facts. And I said, "You do understand that you're in a cult?" "Oh, what do you mean we're in a cult, Ron?" They were so, "That's it, we're leaving." I said, "No, wait a minute." I said, I don't take this as persecution. I said, "I love you." I said, "I love you, and I'm telling you, you're in a cult, and they're going to send you right to hell. And Jesus says, unless you believe I am He, you will die in your sins. And you don't believe that He is Jehovah." "All right, we're out of here." I tell that story because I had no idea what the outcome would be. But in faith and obedience, I still listened to the Lord, and I obeyed Him, and I said exactly what He wanted me to say. And they said, "Well, we'll see in the end." I said, the end's going to be too late when we stand before the Lord. It's too late for you then. God says, "I've written these things that you may know for certain that you have eternal life." They were trusting in all kinds of crazy, stupid stuff. Their own righteousness. I said, "You got no righteousness whatsoever, neither do I." They're like, "I'd never heard anything like that." I said, "Well, the Bible makes it very clear there's none righteous, no, not one." Bible makes it very clear that all our righteousness is like filthy rags out of Isaiah 60. So you step out in trust, never knowing what the outcome may be, okay? All of life is that way. When you got behind the wheel this morning, Mommy, you never had any idea you were going to have a terrible ride on your way to church. I don't know what the terribleness is, but we'll find that out later. You just don't know, do you? Right. And so, see, you operate in the sphere of faith all the time. Just let it ride over into this marvelous being that we call God. That is Yahweh. Not knowing where he was going, so he had to listen attentively. And he did. And so we see in verse 9 there in the bottom of the screen, by faith he lived as a stranger or an alien in the land of the promise, as in a foreign land, dwelling in tents with Isaac his son and Jacob his grandson, fellow heirs of the same promise. Now, we didn't look at it, but there in Genesis 12 and also Genesis 13, Abraham is promised the land of Canaan to him and all his descendants. And actually it goes from the Euphrates River across the Arabian desert all the way to the sea, the Mediterranean Sea. An enormous amount of land that was promised to Abraham and his descendants. All the way down to the Nile River in Egypt. Huge piece of land. Does God ever lie? Did he promise it to him? Yeah, he did. So, notice this. This promise came, and it's in the land of the promise in the Greek. So the promise is referring to the promise of the land. Not that the land is the promised land, okay? Don't get a little mixed up there. The land of the promise. He lived like a foreigner. He lived in a tent. He didn't take and build a stone house and put in solid foundations and start building his city, so to speak. And I'm planting my roots here. My goodness, that would have been me. Doing masonry work, and I said, Lord, you're giving me, I'm inheriting all this land. Guess what? Bam! I'm setting my footers nice and deep right here. Man, I can't wait because this baby that I'm building is going to be around for a long time. Not Abraham. He stayed right in his tent. And so did his son Isaac, and so did Jacob. We're going to get the rest of it as to why they did this. Even though the land was promised to them, they realized that it wasn't for them right then in their lifetime. This is crazy. But in their intimacy with the Lord, they knew that even though they were to inherit all that land and all him, and God's promise was to him and his descendants that they would live in that land and settle down and it was theirs. Well, guess what? Abraham never owned any of it. Neither did Isaac, neither did Jacob. They didn't own any of it other than where they were buried. They bought it. But other than that, nothing. You know what God's saying to you and me? Through Abraham. This place is not our final home. even though you and me, the meek, shall inherit the earth, and we will inherit the entire earth, right now, this is not our home. Where does Paul say our citizenship is there in Philippians? It's in heaven. Our citizenship isn't here. That has tremendous ramifications in my life and your life right now. Don't settle down too deeply here, because guess what? You're a foreigner and you're just passing through. Aren't you? Yepper. Only a short time. And the same was true with Isaac and Jacob. And the same was true with every generation from that period of time down. And it's still true for you and me as followers of Christ. And then we read in verse 10, the reason that he didn't sink his feet in deep, it was because he was looking for the city which has foundations, whose architect, and I don't want to say builder, is God, but you could add that. The word builder there has the idea of, it's two words that are put together in the Greek, and it has the idea of a foreman over the public workers. So he's actually the foreman of public works. How many of you know a foreman of public works and how much work they do? Okay. God's going to be the director, the foreman. Now, it depends on which city we're talking about here, because he's looking for a city which has foundations that will never be shaken. I think we could go with the eternal city, the New Jerusalem, that's going to be in eternity, that God does create, not you and me. But it could also be referring to, and oftentimes this is the way God lays out Scripture, it could be referring to the city of Jerusalem, the capital of the world, during the 1,000-year reign here on the earth. And Jesus is definitely the architect of the new Jerusalem here on the earth, okay? In the literal city of literal nation of Israel. And he'll be the foreman. And he's the guy that will have all those in the redeemed in their human bodies doing the building and the expansion of the city and of that massive area of land promised to the nation of Israel. But so ultimately, Abraham was keeping his eyes on the city built by God. And you and I need to do the same thing. What needs to drive our lives is the same thing that drove Abraham's life. He listened attentively to the Lord. Do we have a concluding slide? I didn't look to see. I don't think we do we? No. He listened attentively to the Lord. And in his listening attentively, he obeyed. Going out, not knowing the details, but walked with the Lord. And whatever the outcome is, the outcome is. And the whole time, he wasn't looking for something here on the earth. He was looking for a heavenly city. He was keeping his eyes on heaven. Don't get me wrong. Was Abraham poor? You better believe he wasn't poor. He was extremely wealthy and extremely powerful. And his eyes weren't set on any of that. His heart and his eyes and his ears was all in love with the Creator, and he was looking for that day when he finally had the opportunity to see the Creator face to face. But guess what? Abraham had already met Jesus face to face. You know that. Yeah. Remember when the three strangers come walking up to him in the heat of the day? And Abraham knew immediately who they were. Jesus and two angels. He said, "Hey guys, will you stick around while I fix a meal for you?" "Oh, we certainly will, Abraham." And Abraham and Sarah, wow, ate with Jesus and the two angels. He got to see him. 2,000 years before he would ever take on human form, Abraham saw him and ate with him right here on the earth. I would imagine that created even a greater longing for that city whose architect and foreman is God. And so what we learn from Abraham's life of faith, trust God. Did Abraham go through a lot of difficulties? You better believe it. Did famine come in the land of Canaan and he had to go down to Egypt? You better believe it. Did he almost lose his wife Sarah down in Egypt to Pharaoh? Yeah, he did. I mean, and the list goes on. And he faced all kinds of difficulty, including Lot and all his possessions being taken in war. And he had to go and rescue Lot and his family from the other kings there. And it was fighting over the wells of water, and the list goes on of difficulties. But he never lost sight. He never lost sight of the city. Everything he did, including the planting of the tamarisk trees there at Beersheba, was in the longing for that city that was eternal. But he knew the entire time that he would not receive the promises. Did you hear me? He knew that he would not receive the promises in his lifetime. He knew that the promises were for the future. And then he would receive the land. He would inherit it. And he is coming back. Those tamarisk trees, planted over 4,000 years ago, are definitely gone, right? I have a feeling God's going to sprout them anew right there in Beersheba. And I have a feeling that Abraham and his family during the millennial kingdom are going to sit under the shade of those tamarisk trees and enjoy them tremendously. He's already heard the words, "Well done, thy good and faithful servant." And you can rest assured that God is a tremendous rewarder of those who seek him. What are you asking him? What are you asking him for the millennial kingdom? I've already asked him a lot of things. Yeah, Beth's well aware of it.
And I truly believe that I will experience those things during the millennial kingdom because of the goodness and the graciousness of this incredible Creator. You have not because you ask not. I might add that you ask not because you don't believe, you don't trust. How deep is your trust in what He has promised to you? Trust and obey, for there's no other way. Well, Lord, thank you. That day's coming, and we will more than shout the victory. And we are so looking forward to being able to see you face to face. And it will be so exciting when we come back with you to establish your kingdom here on the earth. And we will rule and reign with you for that 1,000 years. And then after that, you will create a new earth and a new heavens when eternity begins. And so, Father, thank you for the promises that are so true, that are solid rock, and that you will bring to completion fully and perfectly. And so, Lord, may the promises that you have given us be the anchor that keeps us with our eyes focused on you, and keeps us as we rely on you in this walk of trust, this walk of faith. Thank you for Abraham. Thank you that his journey of faith is over. Thank you for his incredible tenaciousness. He wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but he was tenacious and trusting you and trusting your promises. So much so that he would give his only son, an incredible picture of what you would do for us. And so, Lord, thank you for blessing us this morning. Thank you for challenging us to have trust like Abraham. And thank you for giving us the freedom this morning to be here, and Holy Spirit for taking that truth and ministering to us. I want to give you just a moment. Maybe there's something in the message that he spoke to you, and an issue of trust. Go ahead and talk to him. You are dismissed.